Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Trasnell, and welcome. Oh boy, welcome to the Dexter Retrospective. Now, yes, it is just I. So, to give you a little background on a few things, this retrospective, the reason it's happening, and the reason it's just me, obviously, the reason it's happening is Dexter Revival is happening. I think it's November 7th. I think it's coming out. I'll know a bit closer once I will check right while I'm talking because I don't want to give out false information now, but I think it's November 7th. I know it's November for sure, but so the revival's happening. And with my opening, I'm going to get into that a bit more of why I'm doing this and whatnot, and why I've wanted to do this retro for quite a while. So let's see here. Oh my god, November 7th. I was right. Boom. So, anyways, that's the reason this retro's happening. Why I'm doing it alone is because we had talked about doing it, but it was at the point where if you're listening at the current time, August, July, as you know, Taylor's getting married, Kirklin went to go see his family for the first time of year and just got a baby. So with how many seasons there were, with there being 8, we went, well, it's either not going to happen or, you know what, Travis, if you got the time, you can do it. And there was no way I was not going to do this retro. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time. So now, if you're wondering, also you probably tell by the title, but this is Dexter season 1. I plan to do each season individual. If near the end I don't have time, I might combine a few seasons. For sure, the seasons that I want to do is probably 1 to 5, 1 to 4, so I can just, praise and talk about how great they are, and then 5 really take the task, and then the other ones I could really combine. I don't. We'll see. It all depends on my time. Patrons know about my project dropping in September, so I will be luckily a few more months to watch them. But as far as recording, maybe I might have to put a few together. But my plan is really season by season, as we've done in the past with other retros, TV shows. What do we have done? We've done the Spider-Man animated series, then we did the Clone Wars. That was episode by episode. It was like 3 episodes per one. Would not have had the time to do that, and it's a new format we did because we're thinking about doing other TV show retros, and it's just a bit more easier with the time now that we have as far as all the casts we produce for GeekVerse, just to do season by season. So maybe if you support us on Patreon, because you go to Patreon, read all about it, the more support we have, the more content we can create. I'd love to do episode by episode one day, but as far as our lives right now, oh no, that that would be it would be have to be for a show that doesn't have something coming up. That's usually what we pair our retros with. So this is the Dexter Retrospective. Before we break everything down, head down the description below because, like I said, you get Patreon. If you want to support us, that would be great. Like we said, the more support, the more content we can produce and make. There's a whole kind of paragraph. There's a whole behind the scenes audio version I've dropped as well of how and what the Patreon does for us. But as you've seen, sometimes you were getting like 4 or 5 casts. That's because of the podcast ad revenue, and that because we can have time to pay ourselves to create content, which we've never done before. So everything that you put into, we get back for, or you get back for as more content. So you got that. Everything's ad free, exclusive, and early. This I'm recording in August, so these won't be releasing closer to the public till the actual date of November 7th. So you could have got these months early, so that's a good thing. And if you can't support us, just please subscribe to YouTube, any podcatcher, and if you could drop us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts, that would be greatly appreciated because that's how people can kind of see us and new eyes get on us in the charts and all that sort of stuff. And it does actually help. So a big thank you there. And the description below has everything: our Twitter, our Facebook, our podcast network. What is it now? 6 days a week, 8 shows. Marvel, DC, Star Wars is getting covered on there. Comic books, whole bunch of stuff. We just a new show debut there. Power Rangers, animation. So lots of great stuff there. Check out our separate podcast feeds, Geek First Podcast, which is the main one that has everything we do. But if you just want to listen to reviews or the newscasts or the retrospectives like this, there's solo feeds for all those, or just to go catch up. We have that all the time. That's why the feed's there. We're like, have you ever reviewed this? Yep, it's on that feed now. Where before it'd be like, huh? Now that we do 4 to 5 casts a week, we wanted separate places for these. Nice back catalog. Check out, drop us a line for the Discord, chat to myself, other listeners, other GV hosts, other GUA hosts. Lots of good times there. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm not sure when these dropping off exactly. We'll probably be reviewing movies. Who knows though, because everything's in flux with this is being recorded August 8th, So I'm in One Piece. This is the day after Taylor's wedding. I think I did an all right speech. Everyone said I did a good job. I didn't look at the phone once, so it went good. But here we are. Now the foreplay is over to talk about Dexter. So where to begin? I will talk somewhat like if it's best if you've seen the show, but if you haven't, I will probably not be alluding to massive spoilers in the future. There might be a few here and there, but not massive, but I will try just to keep it to this season. I just got to talk about Dexter's overall first before we get into the specific season. So this came out 2006. We've talked about this on the Saw retrospective before. Check out that Batman retrospective, Marvel retrospective flaws there. That's why I go to the retrospective feed. We had talked about this before that in Saw, I was all over the Saw IMDb boards, and that's how I was back in the day. I'm sure some other people that listen to podcasts or do podcasts, and as obviously, I always got a preference. Sorry if I say I need a water break. I'm gonna say water break because lots of times when I have the other people, I can throw them and get a water break. Now it's just myself talking for like an hour, hour and a half. So beg or bear with me there, and I'll take one before I start this little spiel here. So there we go. We're all pumped up. So I I think many of us probably were on IMDb boards. I loved IMDb boards because it just was that was the only way to connect with film fans for a while. I feel like that was before like Twitter and Facebook's never been that, but Twitter's that way now. But even then, it was great to have these forums as far as like okay, the Dark Knight Rises. I was also in those ones constantly because it was just like the theories, the talk, everything like that. And it was just like if you're a fan of this one specific movie or franchise, you go there, and it was fantastic. Had a really good time. They closed them down. Kind of annoying. I wish they still existed. And you guys say you kind of have Twitter for that, but it's just I don't know. It's just not the same. But so I had I don't know how, but I had watched American Psycho recently around that era. And as I've said before, in 2006 that was the era where I was really starting to like film and TV shows that were not action, adventure, superhero stuff like that. I still liked all that stuff, but I remember seeing because I think it was I think Transformers came out 2007, right? So I think I'd seen The Departed, late 2006, and then I just remember there being a correlation of I saw The Departed, and maybe a couple of years ago I wouldn't have liked the movie that was primarily talking, but I was enthralled, just couldn't get enough of it, and then I was like, who's Martin Scorsese? And it just led this whole kind of film awakening. And then I had seen Transformers, which I was not even the biggest Transformers fans as a kid, but what I would like before, I would have saw that and gobbled it all up. And I remember watching it, being, yeah, this is just not for me. That was the first time it was like that. So 2006, I was taking a lot different film, a lot different things like that, and I'd seen American Psycho. I think before 2006, but that was like the real time where I really dove into it, and it just happened to be like maybe it was one of my first or whatever few viewings of it, somewhere under 5. And I'd watched it and gone to the boards, and then I'd seen someone talk about the show like Dexter, just like this is what the IMDb boards were like, oh, I'd love to see Dexter versus Patrick Bateman and all this stuff. And I was like, what's Dexter? And it was about 3 episodes in at that point. I was like, okay, I'm gonna check it out because I think it's most people, not most people, but I think a lot of people have this. If you look at where we are in this generation right now with the true crime podcasting and Netflix and documentary and stuff like that, I think we naturally have a curiosity about this darkness that can be in people. Because for myself, it's just that luckily, I've been mad before, I've been annoyed, but I've never wanted to take a life. I've never felt those urges. But I think that there was a time where in the 80s, 90s, it was just like this person's a sick fucking psychopath and they're crazy and that's why they're a killer, right? And it's like, okay. But I feel like as the decades went on, we start to go, especially when you look at some of these people, you go, okay, I'm not saying what they did was right, but you look at lots of them come from broken homes, very bad childhoods. They were abused physically, sexually, mentally. Like it's not usually just, hey, they were born a psychopath. Now that does happen. There's case of that, but the majority of the time there is like some sort of origin to it, right? And I think in 2006, it was still at that point of, and for me, it was always the same thing as American Psycho kind of put forward was, okay, why do these people kill and how do they think the way they do? And obviously, American Psycho, if you've seen the movie and Dexter, they share very similarities. I'd say in their first season, not with, Patrick Bateman and Wall Street and the, what's in his mind, what's not. But as far as the being distant to people, being cut off, thinking about things a certain different way, always kind of putting on the mask. They both talk about the mask. So very similar, right? So I'd heard, hey, if you like this show or if you like that movie, you're going to like the show. Watch the show and I'll get more into it. But I was absolutely hooked. It was something that felt, again, at that age for me, it felt like, oh, I'm watching something I'm not supposed to be doing. Like it was still, but my parents were pretty good at that. I watched kind of radar stuff early on. I was a pretty good easygoing kid. If you ask my parents, I was very easygoing, very probably a lot more quiet than I was now. I make up for it, but it still felt like that. Oh, I can't. It felt dark. It felt dirty. It felt raw. Like it felt R-rated, but because they did such a good job of putting you in the mindset of Dexter, literally making you kind of the passenger, dark passenger. We're talking about season two. It kind of just felt like you were watching something uneasy. It's like, oh, this like I'm watching a serial killer do these things, right? And I think the earlier seasons, especially the first one, he feels the closest to what we've been identified that to look at signs of serial killer, right? I talk about already cold, distant, shut off, fake personality, always kind of obsessed with the kill, kind of always lingering thoughts, all these things, right? And the thing, and that was the best thing about Michael C. Hall's performance, which I'm gonna get into and talk about episodes and specific seasons, but it just felt so cold and unhuman, right? So I think that's why the show initially got because yeah, we had Sopranos and there was other stuff with HBO, but I feel like it was still like HBO was the only one really doing that type of like odds TV that had that, oh, like this is risque in a way, and Showtime was doing a lot with weeds and stuff like that. They were at their time quite a bit, to be honest. Like, I guess what they got billions now and Homeland, but I just feel like in this era, Californication, which was dealing with a gigolo who had sex addiction, they're really pushing the boundaries here as far as TV shows. Really, like again, risque, like things you don't really talk about, taboo sort of things. And serial killers. This was a time where I feel like now it's common knowledge. It's just there's a boom. You, like I said, podcast, Netflix, but this was still in the time where I felt like it was newer and we were getting to that sense of what makes a person do these things. And that was to me my always general like curiosity is because like I was saying before, I've never had luckily any thoughts like that. I had a good childhood, as we learned. Dexter had a terrible childhood, but I had a good childhood. Like the most I can say, my parents got divorced, but luckily they're best friends and they made it work. There's a couple of awkward moments there at the beginning, but now we've done countless Christmas and vacations together, and they're both better for it. As far as just like once you get into it more, you just go, what would it take for a person to want to kill life, and what does it take for them to, want to feel that, and that's always been the curiosity to me is like this is a terrible act, and these people are very sick, but it just goes, how do they get to this point? And I think it does help because it does kind of humanize killers in a sense, but I think helps people in the future to maybe help them out or look for signs or things like that. But not that was the show's job. I'm just kind of saying what I was always kind of interested in serial because I read books. It was just this fascination of okay, why? Like I said, how do these people do what they do? Because that's something I could never imagine doing, And it's just like it has to be pretty bad to get to a point like this. And you get some of the horror vibes, which I liked. I liked American Psycho with the humor, and this had that similar, very dry, very dark sense of humor. And I feel like the show for the first four seasons, if you don't know, it's run by Clyde Phillips. And we'll talk about that with the revival and everything like that. I think I'll do a rankings episode, a prediction episode. But he did 1 to 4. I think it was his wife got cancer or something like that. So he stepped away and then he didn't come back. And he's coming back for this new revival season. And the first 1 to 4, the humor, but especially number one, is just it just fucking plays. And not even just the Dexter like in his mind sort of humor, just everyone around him, whether it's Dokes, whether it is Masuka, whether it is just like situational humor, very well done. So that's a good thing. Like this show, when the first episode starts, like tonight's the night, it's gonna happen again and again, has to happen, will happen. Nice night in Miami. That had me hooked right there. And just that first 15 minutes of he's watching the guy, the priest or whatever. He has the fiber wire and he has the kids there. And I think right away they were very smart. And I actually read the books too. I read the books up until whenever right after like Delicious Deck, whenever you start cooking people, the books get even more wild than the show. And I actually will say that the show for the first 4 seasons were better than the books, and then it kind of got the same way. And I don't dog on all seasons, we'll get there, but season 7 is a underrated season that almost got the show back to like where it was, like how good it was in before, and then it dipped very, very, very low. But anyways, they're very clever in the first episode as far as this guy's creepy. The first 15 minutes intense. He's taking this guy, but it's the double of not only is it, hey, you killed kids, and he literally has the kid's body, dug him up and stuff like that. It's I would never do that. Not what you did. So it's this right away, they make you feel easy with watching it. And they talk about that a few times in season 2, as far as when you get in the Bay Harbor Butcher aspect of he is that's how they got away with it. You are watching a serial killer in the show's like tense, right? You're watching a serial killer. He has these thoughts. He has very bad thoughts. You literally in the first episode are introduced to the idea that he is killing animals, like as experimenting. So all the signs that you would think about a serial killer that are there, all the things that make them sick and gross and how he can't connect with people, they're all there. And I think they do a good job of always making him feel creepy and not right. I feel the little later seasons, they really drop the serial killerness. And it's tough because you talk about like he does evolve as a character, but I think with 1 to 4, they always kind of kept this. There's still something wrong with him, and there's something where he feels always detached from society. Where eventually they kind of got to like, oh no, it's just like because I always like they even talk about in this season where he doesn't really feel the need to have sex because like he gets off on killing people. Now we'll get into Rita and how the connections there, but there's times where in this season they really to me specify like the reason he can do that sex is because he's starting to feel somewhat of a connection with Rita and he's starting to get there and be himself. But then later seasons he's just like hooking up with girls randomly and stuff like that. It's like they kind of lose a little bit of what makes Dexter special. Again, you could argue, well, he's changing. I just think they changed him a little too much and they didn't. They, it was poor writing, but we'll get in that later seasons. These seasons, he's specifically a sociopath, a psychopath, serial killer, all these things. But they make you feel okay watching it and not gross watching it because he's taking out bad guys, Harry's code, and he still has a level of even if he didn't have Harry's code, he wouldn't be hurting children. He might not be hurting innocent people, like specifically really innocent people. So right away, it makes you feel uneasy, but then it gives you the pat on the back, like, oh no, it's okay watching this. It's fine to watch this creepy guy. And for me, the reason why, I guess I should say why I'm doing this retro and felt like I had to do this retro from season 1 to 4, maybe 5 to 6, this was my favorite show of all time. Breaking Bad came in, replaced it because Breaking Bad is just a masterclass art. But I would put up specifically definitely season 1 and season 4, but like we'll get in that. Like season 4, obviously, the way it ends is a very big cliffhanger, right? So it's just like you couldn't act on its own. This, I could make an argument for like the premiere, the pilot, one of the best pilots ever, because you meet the character, you meet the world, you meet the characters around him. You know exactly what the show's going for. You know the goals of the show, and it sets you with like a nice little like tease to the future. And it's just like this great 1-hour movie. Again, the only pilot that maybe could break it is Breaking Bad, because literally you could end at the pilot Breaking Bad and be like, that was a great movie. I think this has this aspect, and I could argue that season 1 of Dexter is the like one of the best single seasons of any TV show out there. It's just masterfully done. It doesn't feel like for 12 episodes, a single episode is wasted, and that is a huge thing because we've talked about that before, like many times. Like it's just some shows that they like Disney Plus now do 8 or 6 or something like that. Other networks do 10. It's all about having that right amount. I think the revival is going to be 10, but that I think that I trust them. That's the right count. Clyde Phillips is back, so I trust him with that. But for me, this show was my favorite. I just thought, like I said, I liked the darker aspects. I'm a horror guy next to superhero franchises. Before that, horror is my game. Like I love that world. So it had that. It had comedy. It had a superhero aesthetic vibe with the whole code thing. It had an interesting world. It had Michael C. Hall, who is just, oh, he's just so good. He is a beast in this role, and it makes me so mad he never ever won an Emmy. It sucks big time that he's in the era of Bryan Cranston on Breaking Bad. But I think Bryan Cranston won it like 4 times or something like that. You could have skipped 1 year, especially season 4. That was his year. Legitimately, this was his year. He should have won it. I don't even know. I guarantee you, I look at it, there's no way there's no performance that matches us. But this was I think just because it was a taboo, like risque, like, oh, is this a type of show you would nominate? I think it started getting nominations in season 3-ish, maybe 1 and 2, like for him specifically, but the show got nominated, guest stars, stuff like that. But it never got the huge acclaim like a Breaking Bad, I think, because it was a bit smaller and it is a bit more on the darker side. So I was a massive fan of all those elements when it came to the show. So I love the show. Michael C. Hall is just like he's fantastic in this role. Obviously, I read the book, but I still like read it in his voice. I always want them to do like even though it's not the same universe, like a audiobook with him doing it. the versatility that he has, and again, go watch 6 Feet Under too. He's a guy that I wish, and maybe it's by his own accord because he does plays in some smaller roles, but he should be a much bigger name. He should be in so much stuff. He's on the man crush list. He was like a part of the original four. He is the classic chameleon actor. I would say he's just as good as like when I talk about a Christian Bale or an Adam Driver. He could be that good. I really want him to be like in a Tarantino movie or a Scorsese movie, like someone that could really get him out there. But maybe that's not what he wants. I just think that he is, and he was always my fan cast for the Riddler. I was like, man, if Paul Dano's going to do great, but he would have just fucking killed. But he is so good in the whole show, and that it's very much like why I could still watch the later seasons, how I can still watch X-Men Wolverine Origins. It's like at the end of the day, that movie is not good. They write some bad stuff for Hugh Jackman, but it's Hugh Jackman giving a decent slash good performance as Wolverine, which is one of the best castings. And it's the same in the later seasons. I can still always watch because of him. There's a lot of other stuff in there that's tough to get through, but it was my favorite show for just the quality of it for, and it's still in the top 10. It's like right at I think I have it at 10. If not, maybe I've bumped it, but like right at 10 because just we'll get there. But the later seasons, man, they just take it down. You would think that again, it is different writers, but you can tell it's a whole different crew, or at least a different crew that's show writing it. And it just feels so different. And it just feels so kind of out of touch, even from the kickoff for season 5. But again, we'll get there, trying to just focus on this season. But this was my first show. And I think also my last point before we start breaking down specifics of the season was I think this show did a lot for, and this is going to sound bad because, like I said, oh, I'm not a killer, nothing like that. But I think it did a lot for loners or people that were kind of kept to themselves. And I've always said this before. I've talked about this on After Nine Geekverse, where luckily for me, I was never bullied as a kid or anything like that. And I had multiple friends I would consider good friends. But the problem was, and it wasn't a bad problem to have, but I had like a one friend in each group. I had one friend in the popular friends, I had one friend in the geeky ones, one friend in like the smoke pit, like, I got the emo friend, I got the sports jock friend, and like it was one of these things where a lot of us were all together in middle school, but then as we got to high school, that split up. And it was just like I always had a foot in each door. I always knew everybody, and I was the fucking Travis is the funny guy, stuff like that. That's a whole different conversation. But for me, I didn't feel like I exactly fit in. And there was also tons of people in high school I just didn't like, especially even still now. There's just like, in my opinion, there's a lot of shitty people from like when I went to school, and they're still shitty now. And that's the thing where it's like, I never really felt like I fit. So when I'm watching Dexter into high school, because I graduated in 2011, and it's like middle school, high school, you have those moments where he is just not the killing part, but just talking about not connecting, or just his thoughts, or being alone or isolated, or just the trying to put on a mask. And I feel like we've all, maybe even lucky not to that, but I feel like at some point we've all put on a mask. If it's like being happy to meet like maybe the in-laws for the first time or something like that, or you have a friend like your partner's friend who you don't really like, so you got to play. Like, there's just little instances where if you strip down, you take out the cop aspect, the killer aspect, that sort of stuff, the inner dialogue Dexter would have was stuff we would have. Even if we're annoyed with people, you would have that, like you had those similar instances. So I think that's where they did a good job of, you could be relatable in that sense. Like sometimes you felt like an outcast. And as like I said, somebody for me who eventually I kind of not turned the corner, I'd say, but just found more groups that were appropriate to me and friends that were appropriate to me. There was many times where I would be fine with, I could be alone for weeks on end, like leave me alone. Like I'm very much like my auntie was like that. My auntie's still like that. My grandpa was like that, to where I got my family and my kids. I could not want to be alone. But there's still times where it's like, every once in a while, everyone like, I like an hour to myself. And that's not anything that bugs me, and that was the same way before. Like I was fine being single in that aspect of like I could be alone for quite a while and be good if I was in that mindset and just be away from everybody, especially after high school. Like I was, and then I went out and had my partying years and whatnot. But I was like fine to go to different cities, landscape, keep to myself, get to my money, and that was it. I didn't need those like personal connections and whatnot. So that's where I really kind of bond with the show too. So I think I've got all my personal stuff out of the way. I will take our first ad break here, and then we're getting into the actual show. So that was the big foreplay, but we'll get into it, and we will be right back. And we're back. So as I've said before, well, we were talking about already as far as the pilot, right? I talked about The first 50 minutes, they set up the kill, the code, Dexter's kind of morality, stuff like that. And then we sporadically start to meet every character. I don't know how I don't want to do this episode by episode. I might have to go character by character. Kind of hit storyline by storyline, but just to talk about more Dexter, and then we'll get into the other people. Talking about what I was mentioning previously as far as connecting, we meet him at a point where all his relationships, other than Deb, because he says, like, if I could love anyone, it'd be Deb, all of them are fake, or they are being acted out, or he's just using them for personal gain. He is a blood spatter analyst. If you're listening to this for God knows what reason you haven't seen the show, at Miami PD, and he's very smart, he's very educated, stuff like that. No one really thinks anything's wrong with him except for Dokes, which we'll talk about Dokes. He is just on this kind of, I don't know, boat without a paddle in a sense, in my opinion. Because yeah, he has his code and he knows what he's going to do, but he doesn't have any plans other than like Rita. He's with Rita because that's a shield. He needs to cover like everything in his life at this point. It's just a cover up. It's just I'm gonna look normal and no one will question it because if there's ever a killer and stuff like that, they're not gonna look at me. I got a girlfriend, I got a great job, I got a good track record, like no DUIs, like he's very clean knit, even his hotel, very ACD, anal clean and stuff like that. So when we meet him, he is just he's just killing. That's all. He literally lives to kill, but he also I don't think yearns for a connection, but he is definitely wanting one because at the end of this episode, it's revealed that we have the ice truck killer. That's the big bad for this. And I think that I might be wrong, but I feel like maybe they stole it from somebody, but around Trinity time, they kept saying big bad. And I feel like after they used the words big bad, I heard big bad from everywhere. But if you guys know the origin of big bad, please Twitter, Facebook, Discord, YouTube, let me know. Like, who was the first person to start using it? But because for me, I heard it there and I heard it everywhere. So I doubt it was them that started that trend, but it'd be great if they did. Um, we don't know how much of a connection he's on until the ice truck killer strikes in Miami, right? And he is just it's like a fun like 1-2 punch because he is brought to this crime scene at a Miami pool where Deb is, an undercover cop right now as a hooker. It's his body that is literally kind of gift wrapped and it's frozen. All the blood's been drained and it's been cut in these nice little pieces. And him as like a killer is just like completely entranced. It's like, how did they do this? Why did they do this? What's going on? And that would mean kind of like, because it starts to happen. I think they mentioned like, oh, this is the third one, or it's starting to build up like there is like another serial killer. So it's someone that's complete opposite. So right away, even before we get to the end of this episode, it intrigues him because he's a serial killer in the dark, right? He's not leaving. The most he has is his blood slides, his trophies, which is another serial killer trait. As far as if you read and look in this stuff, lots of times they have these sort of trophies, and it is sort of like to remember their victims. But it's also, if you read a lot about them, they have lots of traits of leaving stuff that they could get caught or clues because they do want like kind of a relief, and they want like there's a great episode later on with Tony Goldwyn, the very underrated Tony Goldwyn. What is it? I'll get the episode name. It's the episode where, like everybody's getting it on. Everyone's having sex and everything like that. It might be no, Pop in the Cherry is way too early. Let's see. A Strange Shoes. Yeah, it's Shrink Wrap. Shrink Wrap. That's episode 8. That's the one where Deb and Brian are getting it on all the time. Rita and Dexter try to get on multiple times. But there's that moment where he tells he's in therapy. Really, it's because there's this woman that committed suicide, and he's like, this feels odd. And he kind of puts it all together as he usually does it, as far as Dexter does. And he starts to talk to his therapist to see what of a hand this therapist had in her death. And it's great because the therapist actually helps him. That's the one that gets him his experiences when he was a child and a toddler with the blood and everything like that. We'll get to that, like how his mother was killed. He helps him get it on with Rita and stuff like that. And at the end, when he does have to kill him, though, he's just like, I'm a serial killer. And there's just like, he literally is like, oh, that relief. Like, that's something that he hasn't been able to share with anyone but Harry, and that's been, I can't remember. He said, I think he's in his 30s in the show, and he said his dad died in his 20s. So it's been like over a decade, right? And so, like, one, there's this serial killer that's out and about, unlike him. So he knows he's not alone. And then two, this serial killer takes an interest in him. It's, he sets up as far as, I think they start to figure out that it's like a truck or something like that. Like he starts to, I can't remember. There's some sort of line or something Deb gives him or something like that where they figure out it might be an ice truck. But I guess it's just an ice truck. I don't know why I would say another truck on there. long story short, they figure out there's a vehicle. He sees it, Miami falls, and that's when the head gets thrown, right, and everything like that. Um, so he starts to be intrigued even more so because then when he gets home, he looks in his fridge or his freezer because he sees like there's a little Barbie head on the freezer door, opens it, and it's like all the pieces of a Barbie laid out the exact same way as the body. So it's this double of, yeah, there's a serial killer out there just like me, and there's he's or she, whoever it is interested in me. And that ending is just like, yeah, it's a cliffhanger, but it's just a brilliant, like, this is like an invitation, like, hey, do I want to play? And yes, I do. And just how he looks in the camera, and it's just like, you are a creepy sick fuck, as Deborah will say later on in the series. Like, it is, and that's where it's just like he's so intrigued as far as this means so much more to him than anything in his life. There's points later on where like him and Rita go on a date, and he's just so worked up. They're on a date. They see there's a crime scene, ice truck killer again, right? Him and Batiste are talking about it, and he specifically said he's picked or chosen Rita to be his girlfriend. Deb answered a abuse 911 call. They met, they got coffee, whatever, and stuff like that. And the reason he picked her is because she's emotionally shut off because she's had so much trauma. Her husband like beat her and sexually assaulted her, all this stuff. So she doesn't want anything to do with sex. She doesn't want anything to do with physical touching, stuff like that. So again, she's just a shield at this point. But this is where like the killer excites him so much that at one point in a date, he's like describing where the body's kind of everything, and he like grabs Rita and he like very aggressively, and she runs out of there and stuff like that. She takes it as signs like he's trying to put the moves on her. He's just so worked up, and that's where it kind of gets in the way as far as his cover. Even it doesn't matter because this intrigues him a lot more because it's something he's never had before, like a playmate, someone that sees and knows who he is. And that's the best thing about this season. And because the other seasons don't really have that. With Trinity, there's not a cat and mouse. There's I'll say other seasons there is like a who done it aspect in a sense, but they're always very kind of disappointing. After this, they never lead to the same results. And then a lot of times, Trinity, Doomsday, Hannah McKay, um, I'm trying to think season two. Well, season two, he was the guy. We'll get in that after. Majority of I'd say majority of the killers that we get later on, and then oh yeah, season 8. Okay, there's a surprise, like a surprise killer, quotations as far as like a who done it, and it's awful. It's just so bad. Like the actors, but oh man, gonna have to talk about that one. This Trinity is the biggest, like people would say, is the big bad, right? Difference is Myers Boys. We meet him episode 1. We know, hey, John Lithgow's Trinity killer. It's all gonna be about him. So there's no cat and mouse. There's cat and mouse in other aspects, but it's not the exact same as far as Dexter, our main characters, on the back foot. This person clearly has an advantage because they know who Dexter are. They're constantly they break into his house twice. They're leading him to victims. They're taking at one point, like luckily for him, they don't take it, but when it's Tony Zucci or Tucci, whatever. Yeah, I think it's Tony Tucci. There's a guy that ice truck killer kind of frames or has victims, or has hostage. So the police think that he must be the killer because he works at ice rink, and there's this whole convoluted stuff to Tony Tucci might be the ice truck killer. He's not. But he leads Dexter and takes a photo of him. When Dexter runs upstairs, the photo is left there, and it's just I don't know, just to have some fun. And then the whole episode was him taking photos, so it's kind of like commemorating the memory of them being together for the first time. So he's constantly on the back foot, and so are we, because I love that they introduce the killer later on in the show. It is someone we end up knowing, but it's not one of the like cops or someone we should have known the whole time. And I think it's done very smartly because the character, it's a very minor way of introducing the ice truck killer. But I love the whole buildup of, like I said, the cat and mouse, that whole thing of them leaving photos of his like places of his childhood with Harry. And once we learn, I guess we'll kind of get into that because I'll talk about Dexter more with the other characters. But I think we kind of got to transition in this, that these episodes keep going. He's kind of wondering who it is, stuff like that. And at one point, the killer kind of goes away. One of my favorite episodes is, oh man, what is his name? He's Darth Maul in the Clone Wars series. Oh, I can't remember his name. Let me look it up because it's gonna bug me big time. He's the voice of Star Killer and everything like that. Let's see, Darth Maul, Clone Wars voice. Sam Whitware. Okay. Sam Whitware. And honestly, I feel this way about a lot of people from Dexter. they should be bigger than they are. Sam Witwer's a guy that's like such a good actor. He's a different type of cat, but he's a really good actor. And the fact that he's not in as much as he should be or isn't a bigger star always perplexed me. But anyway, so the Ice Truck Killer never really goes away, but he kind of does disappear for a bit because they do this Tony Tucci thing that introduces who the Ice Truck Killer is. But then they also have this guy, Sam Witwer, I can't remember his name, but he wants the fame, so he just plays like he is the Ice Truck Killer, and he's like falsely, admitting to all these things just so because he wants. They literally tell him like he wants a movie, he wants to defend himself, so he's just a sad sap that wants a life. They even think like, oh, he killed his mother. No, his mother passed away, and he just buried the body. He couldn't even cut it up, stuff like that. So like the Ice Truck Killer is always this looming presence, even when it takes a little back foot. And one of my favorite moments is, we'll get into the character Jeremy later on, but he has connection with this other guy that has these dark, feelings that doesn't go well. So he thinks Ice Truck Killer's caught, and there's one episode when they do catch him where the whole time he's like, this isn't the guy, like all the signs like he's just the pretender and everything like that. But then they find this, they find the mud, they find all this stuff. So at this end of this episode, he's so convinced that he doesn't have any connections with anybody, and this might be his last chance to connect with this guy before he gets taken to, court, death row, stuff like that. And it's so great he sits down and Sam Witwer's looking all mad. He sits down and Dexter's like, hi. And then the Sam Witwer goes, who the fuck are you? And that smile, Dexter, he does some good smiles, but just that was such a nice look. Cause I remember watching the first time, like, I didn't think this was the guy at all. But as they're starting to smartly show you all the signs, it's like, is this the guy? Like, is there a way? Like, how are they gonna do this? I don't know. And then just that, like, who the fuck are you? Because clearly the Ice Truck Killer would know who Dexter is, would take an interest in, right? It doesn't take that much longer till we actually learn who the Ice Truck Killer is. And again, I really appreciate that us learning who the Ice Truck Killer is not the same time as Dexter, because their perspective switches, right? Because we get from Dexter, his world introduced to him, and then it's like, who is this Ice Truck Killer? Why are they interested in me? How they know about me? All these things. So when we get revealed that Brian, or I guess Rudy, what is his name? It's Brian Moser, but I can't remember his fake full name. But Rudy is Dexter's new boy, or Deborah's new boyfriend. Now, I think the reason it's introduced in a smart way is because of Deb's track record. Multiple times she's talking about she's dating shit guys. We meet this one guy who's like a mechanic, but he's just cheating on his wife with her and all this stuff. So we get that she's having bad luck at love. So when they introduce Rudy, the good thing is he's Tony Tucci's guy, whatever. As far as Tony Tucci's this guy that gets kidnapped, gets his arms and limbs cut off, everything like that. So his job, Rudy's job, is like he's I can't remember the technical term, but he makes prosthetics and stuff like that, right? So the first episode we meet him, he's just kind of randomly there. Like he's literally just the doctor. Like if you're on Grey's Anatomy and there's like a nurse character off the side, that's him. They don't pay any attention to him. I think it's the next episode that they do some sort of like him and Deborah share a glance and stuff like that. They do a good job of just like putting in, I think, naturally, as far as sprinkling him in, but then also setting up that Deb's had shit love life, and this could be a guy that could work out for her and stuff like that. So, and it doesn't feel like a huge storyline, it's just like little off the side, give something Deb to do. So I personally, when they revealed him, had no idea it was coming. I loved it. And this whole episode of like the guy pretends, Sam Witwer pretends to be the guy. Dexter figures out that's not him. And there's no signs though. There's no murders. And he posts on like what is it, like a Craigslist ad or something like that. It might be Craigslist or the equivalent in this universe if they didn't get the rights to it, as far as, hey, Barbie, why the cold shoulder and stuff like that. Just kind of putting it out there in the ether, like maybe he's like out there. And there's this great moment of Deborah phones Rudy, gets off the phone. He's like, don't worry, Ken, we'll share a cold one soon. So he responds to Dexter. And then when he gets up, he walks into the back of his house and he has a whole like big refrigeration unit. And that's been the whole thing, is like he's freezing these bodies. How's he doing it? How's he getting around? But it's literally an industrial and like built into his house. So that reveal was great. And again, so it switches the dynamic, because one of, if not my favorite episode, probably the finale is still my favorite episode, but is what is the title here? Let's see here. It's Father's Knows Best. Yeah. So Oh, this episode is just so good. It's when they go on the road trip together. And so Dexter finds out because he's adopted by Harry. If you don't know that, Deborah's his adoptive sister. Harry took him in. We don't know why. He asks about, he asked Camille a few times. He doesn't really know. His past is in the history. Harry's just said, and I like all the flashbacks. They do a good job. Maybe the Michael C. Hall as like a teenager is a little they're a little iffy. They're the wigs and stuff. There's only so much you can do, but I get why they did and everything like that. And it was fun to see like at least James Remar until he becomes Ghost Harry actually interact with some of the main cast. So I get it, but it does look like a little goofy, and it was a choice. Was it like should they maybe cast another person? I think so, but like I get why they did it. That was a common thing back then. But it is just funny when you see the photos. Like they really made Michael C. Hall dress up like this, and Jennifer Carpenter later on. Um, but we're just set up. He's adoptive, and Harry just sets up that something bad happened to him when he's younger, and whatever got in him was not fair, and his life's gonna be different, and he's gonna have to share all these emotions. And they got lots of great flashbacks as far as like this one where this girl asks him to the prom, and he's just like, why would I do that? And Harry's like, I think she wanted you to ask her. And he goes, well, that's not what she said. And he's like, women, and I sometimes want things, but they can't ask. They're hinting, and all these good things as far as one, just like the actual killer stuff, as far as like they like practice killing, they practice, who would be right on the code and stuff like that, or practicing like real life stuff like the girls that he doesn't get the social cues on because he's a little more than a little messed up. That stuff was all great, and it does give us a great dynamic for what I'm talking about with Brian. So he's adopted. He gets a message in the mail one day that his actual biological father has passed, and they left him like this house, right? And he was like, oh, my dad passed a long ways ago, Harry, everything like that, adopted me. So this clearly is a mistake. I think even checks with Noah stuff like, no, it's not a mistake. You got left you. It's your house. So like he's gonna just sell it, but he needs to clean out. So him and Rita are gonna go on this road trip, and Brian, I guess I'm still there's Bonnie, Brian, Rudy. I'll just call him Brian for now. We'll get to the reveal later, but Brian's his real name. Brian is so intrigued because he's just asking him and all this stuff about asking Deborah about how he react to the news, stuff like that. And Deborah's like, yeah, he's at the end of the day, she's like, yeah, he's quiet and keeps himself, so I'm just gonna leave him be and let him deal with it. And Brian's such a good puppeteer. He just goes like, yeah, maybe he's quiet because he doesn't know how to ask for your help. And there's this moment when they show up to this place and Deborah hugs him and he's like, why are you here? And he's like, oh, I know sometimes you can't ask for help, but I'm here anyways. And then we get a great moment. Oh, and it's a moment that this whole season, because especially once you get real with Deborah and Rudy, Brian, all this stuff, and Brian's big reveal at the end, this is one of those shows which is the best. You get this great first run through, and then when you go back and watch the next time, it's even better because I'm gonna spoil what the twist is now to kind of talk about this. So I'm gonna move forward and go back and talk about this again. It's revealed the whole reason why Brian the Ice Truck Killer takes a fancy of Dexter, is interested in him. It's not just because he's a serial killer. It's because he is his biological brother. They had the same mother. Harry didn't take Brian because he felt he was too old and too messed up. And that's what's great because Harry, for the first half of the season, is painted as a saint, right? He's painted as this guy who found out this kid about Dexter, and he had all these problems, but instead of putting him into the wild, maybe let him kill someone, having him go to prison, Dexter being killed himself, he takes him in, takes his cop knowledge, and like, how could I get this guy to try and have somewhat of a normal life, even if it's faking it? Because there's a great flashback of when someone goes to take his photo and he doesn't smile, and Harry just says, oh, like, even if it's, you're not happy, you just fake it. And at one point they're like in this like hayride, and he's like throwing stuff around and he's having a great time. And Harry's like, oh, I can't believe you're having, you look so happy. He's like, are you kidding me? Like, I hate this place. Like, my allergies are firming up, everything like that. And even like Harry's like a little happy, and because Dexter doesn't know just to keep to himself, he doesn't have those emotions. He just shoots Harry right down because he's doing exactly what he said. So anytime Harry thinks he's actually normal, having this good life, Dexter reaffirms, I'm like, no, I'm just playing around. I'm pretending like you told me to. But then this is where we start to get like the cracks of Harry, as far as he learns in the finale that he didn't take Brian. He set Brian to be that kid fending for himself. In this episode, when we get the first cracks, he lied about the biological father. Dexter starts to put that together. They do some like very, very like eye roll, as far as in the very first few minutes of this episode, we see him have his shirt off and he has like this big scar. And Cody's like, "Where'd you get that, scar?" He's like, "Sword fight." And I love that because I've used that one before. So they introduce the scar right away. Same episode, they talk about these surgeries and whatnot. But anyway, so this is the first crack of Harry. He lied to him about, he just didn't want him to connect to his life. He needed some sort of blood transfusion. The dad did that and stuff. So he starts to put that together through flashbacks, and he finds like a postcard he did write and was like, "Wow, this was actually my dad." Brian, and this is how fucked up Brian is. Brian has that. I would assume is the same dad. Some people have actually like had this theory that what if Harry was Brian's dad, or like biological dad, like that would have been fucking weird. But there's a whole bunch of what ifs you could do with this show. But anyways, when Brian and Dexter go there, or Brian and Deborah go there, or Dexter, I keep fucking their name up, Dexter and Deborah. Dexter opens the door and it's just Brian standing there and he's smiling. And Dexter's like, "Hello?" He has no idea who this guy is. Like, "Hello?" And he's like, "I've waited a long time to meet you." And Deborah just pushes, and Dexter and Brian do like hug a little bit, but then Deborah like pushes right past her Brian. And that's the best thing about these episodes is with Harry, and because he takes cracks about Harry in this episode, but we don't know that he knows about Harry, right? Like specific. We just think that maybe he knows about the serial killer stuff. But it all makes sense because when he made him those photos that the ice truck killer was leaving was all photos. I think I mentioned this earlier, but all photos with Dexter and Harry in certain locations. And he just has this huge hate towards Harry and this huge hate towards Deborah, because Deborah, it's like, even in this scene where this is this moment, like, and Christian, I think it's Christian Carmago, however you say his name, great actor. He's in the Hurt Locker, he's in Twilight, very under House of Cards, very underrated actor that I never thought was going to blow up. But again, he should be in a bunch of stuff. If I was directing stuff like this, I'd be putting him in a character actor, all stuff, because he's great in this role. He's the same thing as Michael C. Hall, where he has to play multiple versions of himself and he knocks it out of the park. But he's getting this moment finally with his brother, who isn't seen in maybe 20 years or something like that. And then his, according fake sister, has to push him aside to get the hug. And he can't really admit or like express those feelings because he's like, "Oh, I've waited so long for this. This is his life defining moment." And to Dexter, he's just a fucking guy who's just like the nether bad boyfriend of Deb. So it's a great moment, but also throughout the episode, he's constantly like taking little digs at Harry, like maybe Harry doesn't know best, all this sort of stuff. And once you know that it is his brother, that one, he just kind of hates it that he got severed, but two, Harry did leave him. Like, and this is where like good guy Harry goes away, because it's like, you left everything you said, like, "Oh, the reason I adopted Dexter is because I didn't want you to be lost. I didn't want you to be lost in the system." Like I was just saying, I didn't want you to be, hurt. All the reasons he would take in Dexter. He didn't do that for Ryan just because he thought he was too old. And he even says all he saw was some fucked up kid. And it's just like, it's great as far as the entire show. Once Brian gets revealed as Ice Truck Killer, we start to pivot and we're in Dexter's world, but then Brian is like this dash of reality. Now, whether it's good or bad for what Dexter and Ryan think, like, Dexter's had this code put in by Harry, but there is still, and that is where we'll talk about later seasons, there is still a little more humanity to Dexter. I think the fact that he would not kill kids is still like, okay, this shows he's there. He does care about the kids and Rita eventually. He doesn't feel at this point that he could love them, but he does get protective about them, because I think it's in his almost code sense where he goes, "Rita and the kids are good people. They didn't deserve anything that happened to them." And that's how he kind of not cares. Remember, like I said, almost becomes like a caretaker. But some feelings start to grow, and he does eventually, love Rita and stuff like that. But we'll get into season 5. Oh, woo. But Brian just is such an interesting dynamic, and it's good that we don't really learn to the finale of his true purpose, his true motivations, and it's great. So even when we're revealed that it's him and that he's playing Deborah, it's still cat and mouse game, because there's other people looking into him. He's still just, we're trying to figure out, like, why does he want Dexter? What's his ultimate goal? Like, does he have anything specific he's doing with these people that he's killing? And not necessarily, but he's just using them for little like reminders for Dexter, or sometimes to fuck with the police. And I think they have great chemistry. It's very fun. And I like that he slowly tries to like form that brother relationship at one point. Like Deborah, they really hint that when Harry adopted him, Dexter kind of became the favorite, but it's not so much that he became the favorite. Harry just needed to spend more time with him, like to look after him, because of the way he was messed up. But Deborah took this, oh, he's the kid that, Harry liked more. So every time that, like, there's this one episode where they're fighting a lot, and it's because Brian wants to get close to Dexter, and he uses against Deb, but Deb just thinks it's another situation of, oh, my boyfriend likes Dexter more than me. I can't. And he does this on purpose. There's times where he's like, oh, you want to come over? Oh, no, I can't. I'm gonna be with Dexter. I'm tired. Or he'll say, like, yeah, I'm tired. I'm just gonna eat with Dexter. Like, Dexter, like, oh yeah, this is the way it's gonna be. And she's like, well, come over after. He's like, we'll be drinking. And he's not even drinking that much. We'll be drinking. I can't come over. He's such a great character as far as playing the game. And he went for the long con. He really did, and it's just like a fucking weird, and that's the show gets really taboo, but it's very fucking weird that he is Dexter's biological brother and he's sleeping with his adoptive sister. It's this weird triangle, and I'd love, like, they would never do this, but I would love if there was like a Marvel Cinematic Universe version of this, the What If show of, like, every season has these what ifs, and man, I would love to see, like, what happened if Brian, like, turned the corner and didn't become bad, like fully bad, right? And he could have found a way to work with Deborah. Like, they could have been this weird fucking unit. We'll get in that eventually. But let's take our second ad break, and then we're getting in a little more Brian and then some of the other characters as well. So we'll be right back. And we're back. So talking about Brian, that so he has this whole idea and stuff like that. He's gonna kidnap Deb because he can get Dexter to kill her. Obviously, that does not happen. I know I'm kind of jumbling some of the stuff at the end, but Tisa starts to catch on, or not catch on, but starts to figure out stuff. So he's kind of on the run. But Dexter does figure it out that, oh, it's Brian. At that point, it's too late because he's trying to get Deborah on this boat so bad. Like, it's an episode as far as, like, Deborah keeps getting busy. He's like, oh, just come here for like 15 minutes. He proposes and stuff like that. And I think he does a good job of building a, like, real but fake relationship with Dexter as, like, the boyfriend and stuff like that. He gets her on the boat. He proposes. He kidnaps her, everything like that. And we'll talk about Dose because there's some finale stuff here. But that's when you get the reveal as far as, okay, the brother stuff, the connections and everything like that, and what he wants him to. And there's, again, great cat and mouse. He breaks into his house again and plays Born Free on Dexter's computer and stuff like that. He just wants Dexter to be himself. Like, he knows, and that's where he said, like, he broke out of, like, an insane asylum or a mental home, and he said he tracked down his brother finally and found out he was just like him. And that's how we get that connection. And that's his whole deal that he just wants him to be free. He doesn't want him to have these shackles. He doesn't want him to live a fake life and everything like that. He doesn't want Harry to sit on his shoulder like Jiminy fucking Cricket, which is kind of funny because Harry does become that in later seasons. He becomes this ghost Jiminy Cricket. And it's interesting because so it's tough, right? Because there's the big showdown. Like I said, they go back to their family home. You get all these great stuff of, like, he used to paint some of the girls' nails like a certain rainbow color. In the flashbacks, you see that their birth mother had that pattern. So, like, when again you watch it all with the information you have, it just makes sense. It's so well laid out. I think it's laid out even better than the books. In the book, it's just a killer, like similar to Ice Truck Killer, but then also, like, they see images and it looks exactly like Dexter, and they start to worry it's Dexter. But it's kind of cheesy, and then, like, Laguerta gets killed and all these things and stuff like that, and he gets away. Now, I will say I've always gone back and forth because I think I love villain and heroes with personal connections. I think that's why I kind of love the Batman Joker version where the Joker is obsessed slash almost in love with Batman. I love that, and it's almost vice versa with Batman too. I love the classic Thor and Loki, brother versus brother, or the classic, Ray and Kylo. That's a big thing for me. Or, Loki and Sylvie recently, as far as these hero and villain combinations that, like, maybe share a bond, share a potential love, uh, you know, interest or substance or something like that, but because they're on opposing sides, it can't happen. This has that thing, right? Of you want, like, and especially Dexter, there's this great scene where so he has Deborah laid out the same way, and he's like, we're gonna kill her together. He goes to kill Deb, Dexter stops him, he gets away, and then Dexter does this thing where he sets up Deborah at his house, like a fake Deborah, using his prosthetics to get Brian to come back to kill him. He does, and then he kidnaps him and he takes him back to his place. Lots of stuff that has to, like, really line up for Dexter. Like, could he get back in that crime scene, like, Brian's actual place? I don't know. Like, would Brian come back that same night? I don't buy it, and that's what it's tough, right? Because I've said it's like a great single season. So we get to the point where Dexter and him have this family, which is, oh, so good. This scene is so good for both of them. But he ends up killing him, and it just ends the storyline, right? So as a solo singular season, that's where I think it does help because you get that resolution. I'm someone that, like, at least from the books, I'm not saying I like the books better, but I love that they keep Brian alive. What happens is they have their interaction and Brian gets away, and he constantly comes back and look at the books a little bit. Once Dexter have kids, he's like the uncle, and it's like he actually ends up making a face turn. Now, could that work in this show because it's almost so realistic? No, I think he does so much bad stuff, but I think it's a character I would have liked to have kept around. But do you sacrifice the nice kind of solo singleness of the season? No, it's tough. So I respect what they do, but this is what I really like is they're having this, meeting and he's talking about his sister and he's like fake sister, like he's really hitting it in. And one of the last lines he says is like, I just wanted you to be yourself. Like you're picking your fake sister, your fake self over your real life blood brother who's presenting you a life where you could be your own. And Michael C. Hall, there's a few times he has emotions, like at the very beginning, the pilot, he's like, look what you did to the priest. He doesn't do that too much. I feel like they did that in the pilot just to like really spruce up the scene to get people like, oh, this is a great scene, but his burst emotions don't come out that much. So there's just a great moment where he's talking about how he's trying to get him to have a free life and could be himself. And Dexter's like, don't you think I know that? Like he just yells at him. And Michael C. Hall portrays it in such a good way that he looks so uncertain, like he's gonna kill Brian. He knows he has to. It's the code. He even says this is a great moment where Brian wakes up. And he's like, "Oh, you're supposed to be asleep. Like I didn't want to do this like this. I can put you back. Just I can put you back down." Brian's like, "No, no, like you got to do it this way." And it's this thing of he is so torn this moment because he always wanted is somebody that would accept him, somebody that would accept him for him. He's had to lie about his whole life. He doesn't have anybody. And this is somebody, and not just somebody, his own brother that he's starting to remember, get these emotions that would be there for him. And he feels like he is settling. He knows he's taking the life he wants less, but it's to keep him safe and it's to follow a code. But again, he's so unsure because this code's a little rocky because he's starting to learn things about Harry throughout the season that don't, we get into this more later seasons, but make him question the code, make him question, should I be doing this? Should I follow this guy who lied to me and maybe didn't believe me in certain aspects, which we'll get into again in season 2? But he's in such a moral conflict, and it's just kind of that's where I think that the only way I can explain it, legitimately the only way, because I don't know if it even makes sense for Dexter. I think whatever little human part he has, that's what makes him pick Deb over Brian, because he does know that. Like I always wonder, there's that moment when him and Brian are standing over Deborah when they're unconscious, and Deborah, he's talking about killing Deborah. At that moment, Dexter's not trying to escape. He's not trying to attack Brian. He's kind of going with the flow. I wonder if Brian didn't put up Deborah to kill, what would happen with Dexter? Would he have snapped out of it, or would he have left with Brian? Like, but that was the tipping point. And that's where, again, because even the code, I don't even think it's a Harry code. I think he's been on the planet Earth to know who's a good person and who's a bad person. Deborah does not deserve to die. So I think that's where he takes that ultimate jumping point. But he's so torn in that kill. And it's when he's like talking to his brother, and his brother's kind of making one last plea of like being your true self, and he just slits his throat. And and he's sorry. And he just goes up, he crawls, and he sits in the corner, and he raises Brian. And it's the first time really he's almost crying, or he is crying. It's the first time we've seen any real emotion like that. We've seen like he had the sex scene where he's getting a little emotion. We've seen when he like fell in the blood, but this is like a true human. He is crying over someone or something. He is feeling that urge of so many emotions hitting at him, and it's fantastic because we even get to go, which I love. We'll talk about season 2. They carry that over. He's unsure about his decision still. He's not under 100% okay with it because he knows what he lost. And I love that there's a few episodes that cover that. So Brian, and that's why for me, when I was talking about the personal connections, that's why I love Trinity. John Lithgow is fantastic. He definitely gets more acting performances because we learn right away, hey, he's Trinity. But I love, like, I Shark Killer is probably my favorite because that personal connection, because it just had that full like whoosh moment. Because I saw the show and then I read the books after, and then I got caught up, and then like I said, I stopped buying them eventually. But I it was like such a nice tight little bow the whole season. Where season 4 we'll get into, but I think there's some stuff that like you could improve. I think it's a fantastic season. You could argue that's the best season, but this season I think it's just the same way Ice Killer is just wrapped up in a perfect bow. So Brian, Rudy, Biney, the Ice Truck Killer, just phenomenal performance, phenomenal story weaving, phenomenal. Like, it's a great character foil or villain foil for Dexter. So it's just so well done all the way around. Where Trinity, I could bring up a few things where it's a little messy. It was this thing, I don't know, but this is just, and it's core to the character. To me, it's the best mystery they've done. Skinner, no, the guy at the end, no. So it's a mystery with personal gain, and it has ramifications on the entire series going forward. So now we should probably talk about Deborah, right? Because she was in this whole bit and everything like that. So she's good. Like, I'm not gonna say that. Like, I guess the way I'm trying to say it is, she in the books and everything like that, and she gets this way with the show. The way she is later on the show, the foul mouth, no attitude, very in your face type of person. That's the way, I think, at least in the first. That's how I remember her in the first book. I remember in majority of the books, and then the shows. She, like, here's the thing. I'll say she's just kind of here in this season, but she has to be. And I think the reason is she starts to be like a little more confident near the end, but she plays that rookie role well. She plays the doting sister very well. And I think what happens is in the later seasons, when we get that kind of the classic Dev interpretation, right? Like I said, foul mouth, in your face, no fucks given. You need her. This season breaks her and it builds her up, and she gets great character motivation, or sorry, development from that. And even motivation because, like, she has lots of red flags about people, For the first bit of this show, she's just the classic sister who's trying to make her way on the force, who has a bunch of romance problems, right? She's kind of a plot device to help Brian get closer to Dexter. Now, I think Jennifer Carpenter does a good performance. I think she is a good character in this, but I think she is, like the rest of the show, there to serve Dexter. I think later seasons, Rita, even Angel, you could make a case, are there to have their own stories to really, and that's where I feel like you feel even less connected with everybody in this, because lots of time we do get a few scenes with characters alone, but season one feels so much of it's Michael C. Hall / Dexter guiding us through this world, and we only meet people through his eyes, like I said, barring a few occasions. That's where, like I said, season two, season three, Deborah's getting her own full-on storylines by herself, has nothing to do with Dexter. And I think it's neat as far as, I think she plays, like I said, this very kind of youthful, puppy-eyed, doe-eyed, just wanting to be, a good old cop and follow in dad's footsteps. And I want my brother to talk to me more, unlike me. I'd like to have a love life. Like, it's a great kind of younger sister, you know, sometimes a little pathetic because she is so kind of grovelly, and she is just so like, I want to get on the force, and she's getting bullied around LaGuardia. Like, the Deb that gets bullied around later on in other seasons would swear, fight. She literally starts to tear up sometimes with LaGuardia calls her, embarrasses her in front of other people, So that's where it's like the character is a lot of cliches in this season, but I think it's great because not only her experience on the force, but being with Brian. And they, again, that's what I love about these first four seasons, is they feel like all the storylines really carry over. Where the other storylines sometimes, sure, an actual plot line of like, hey, Dexter killed a guy, Deb season, then we go forward. I mean, as far as they really, like, Deborah deals with the ramifications of being with the Ice Truck Killer a few episodes into season two. Dexter does, everybody, like even the Miami PD does in a way. So that finale, like that's to me the first time you really start to see like the Deb we're gonna know and love, because she, is on the table. Dexter saves her. Dokes and LaGuardia are there, and there's a great moment. Dexter's like, "We're in here." He went through the back. All this sort of stuff. Dokes, we're gonna talk about probably next. I love Dokes, but they kind of figured out that, hey, Dexter is on to something. That he got the tip before them that he knows that Brian, because he's running labs and all stuff, he knows that Brian's Dexter killer, but he said he wanted to confirm before he broke Deborah's world. Really, it's just he is playing the classic Dexter game of he wants his cake and eats it too. He wants his sister to be safe, but he also wants to be the one to find Brian, kill him, or confront him before the police. Plus, he doesn't know what the police may know about him, all this sort of stuff, right? I digress. When they have saved Deborah and they're outside with all the cops and everything, the ambulances, Dokes is reaming him out like, how could you got a call. Dexter says like, oh, he called me, he said he'd hurt Deb if I called him cops, but he's like, he's just reaming him out like, what do you do? I'm gonna write this guy up, all this sort of stuff. And Deborah just bears like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, he's a fucking hero. He saved my fucking, like, that's to me why the finale, you see that. And then there's this great, it's like, just thinking about it, there's this great moment where they're in the ambulance together and she realizes it's so dirty, but Brian killed a hooker, took this ring off her, and gave that as the ring to propose to Deb. And there's this great moment where the dust has settled. They're going to the hospital, and she looks down her hand and she sees the ring and she's trying to get it off. She can't. And Dexter's like, "You're gonna dislocate your fucking finger. Let me do it." And it's just this, she says like so great as we get into other season, but she's just like, "Why me, Dex? Why?" And she just goes, You're lucky, I guess, or you're lucky, I guess." And for us, we know you were just a pawn in all this. You were just used so he could get closer to Dexter. But for her, she doesn't know that. She just thinks like, "Why did he choose me?" And also that scene on the boat where he does kidnap her, where she starts to get like little heebie-jeebies when the only clue they found was this wrapper to a mint. And there's a great, like, he takes it and she smells like, "Oh, gross." And he's like, "Oh, what is that? Why is it gross?" And there's this back and forth. And she just says, like, "Oh, it's bad memories." And he's like, "Yeah, wasn't this the one clue that the ice truck killer left behind?" And then she kind of goes, like, "Yeah, how do you know that?" And there's this great term where he's just like, "Oh, I don't make mistakes, but when I do, they haunt me." And she goes, "Oh, that's not funny." And then, he's like, "Oh, did you really not know who I was?" Like, it would really fuck with a person. Like, I could only imagine. I feel like it fucks with anybody if you're in a relationship with someone like cheats on you or something. But if you're a cop who does that for a living, and that's what she deals with season 2, we'll get into, and no suspicion that this guy is the guy, especially once they start talking about like freezers being in houses and stuff like that, she doesn't even put two and two together that, hey, this guy's a fucking huge ass freezer and stuff like that. But and you wouldn't, right? Because you think she's in love, and she goes through a lot. Like, there's that moment where she's on the boat and she's like, "I know you and everything. You don't have to do this." And Brian's like, "This isn't how I wanted to be. I didn't want to hurt you." And then she goes, "I know." And then he's like, "Do you want me to keep doing this? Does this make it feel better for you?" And he's just like a complete, like, showing his like psychopathic ways. He's cut off from her. So between that and she asks like, "Why me?" And she just starts breaking down, thanking him for saving her. Like, she is formed into the Deborah we know, and she just goes through a lot in those 2 episodes. Like, it's super traumatic stuff. And Jennifer Carpenter does a great job as far as like throughout the whole series being broken, being the doe-eyed one, but that finale really like steps up and everything like that. So I like Deborah, but I think she's kind of more here for, like I said, the Dexter purposes and to be a good guiding light as far as she is a good person in this season. Talking about a good guy or a good person, Dexter, Sergeant James Dokes. Now, talking about the IMDb boards, I got a funny story here. So, mm, maybe you know what? There's a tease. I'll save it for season 2 because that'll get us on a whole different track record. But the boards love Dokes. And this is a guy that, man, this guy was born to play Luke Cage. What's his name? I think it's ER King or something like that. I can't remember, but he's another guy that, like, I don't know if he was in soaps because he has that sort of attitude sometimes, but didn't see in anything else, just Dexter. And he's great as Dokes. Dokes is one of the best characters of the entire franchise. Not only does the actor just, that meme that was going around months ago on Twitter and Instagram of like the who's an actor that understood the assignment, and that's him. He knew what he was supposed to do. He plays this guy. So right, he's a hard ass. He's an asshole. He gives no shits, but they do great moments in the series where they start to give him like a little heart, and it's so fantastic. Whether it's at one moment where he has an affair with a woman and she's shot and he finds her, and when he finds that she's dead, Eric King, maybe he's not Eric King, maybe it's just Eric King. He acts that out well. There's moments where before Deborah and Brian get together, it's funny, they hinted that both in season 1 and season 2, that Dokes, like, I wonder if they were thinking about using him for further seasons and doing this dynamic that they do with Quinn later on, as far as Dokes takes a liking to Deborah, and you can take that as like, is it a rookie way or is it a romantic way? I take it as a romantic way because there's times where he feels like he's trying to put the moves on her. But the good thing is he just plays this complete, like, the guy at work you would know that, oh fuck, I hate this guy. But he gives him shades of heart. He gives him shades of something's underneath all that. And then and that's where you learn a lot about Dokes. The first few episodes, he's quite integral to it because of that affair, because of the drug dealer guy. Like, he's one of the first few guys, other than maybe Deborah, we get a lot of scenes of him alone. He is the guy, and I love this because I talk about this in the book as well. He is the only person that's, he says like, all my covers, all this stuff. So why does Sergeant, out of everybody, Sergeant James Dokes not buy it? And They talk a lot about this more in season 2, but it's because Dokes has a bit of a darkness and he's been through some stuff and he feels some certain ways. Feels more similar to Dexter than anyone else. So it's this great, they talk about in the book, they talk about it in the show, the dark pasture. And it's like in the book, I don't like it. They really describe it as like it's an aura around, you could see a shadow, and then that starts to grow because there's a fucking cult. It gets weird in the books, but I love that idea. And that's why I guess for me, people did not like it in The Dark Knight Rises. They hate, and I understand it. They hate Joseph Gordon Levitt's explanation for how he knows Bruce Wayne's Batman. He's like, I just saw you at the orphanage and saw that eye. It's like, I've seen those eyes before. But for me, because the books in this show, I do buy it. And I feel like in real life, I've never had that, but I feel like you have, and especially if like in dating, that you have moments like that where you've been through something and someone's been through something very similar and you have an experience shared and you can almost just look in that person's eyes and know exactly that you've been through similar shit, right? And that's how I guess for me, it's happened in real life. And I feel like in this show, I bought as far as Dexter has a darkness in him, way more than Dokes, but still, Dokes has a darkness, and they just represent one another, or they can just see that in each other. Now, Dexter does it, he plays coy the entire show up into the finale. They get in fights, they call each other out. Dexter at one point like puts fucking judo and doing stuff on him, and he's choking him, and Dokes is just constantly starting to look into his background and stuff like that. And it's great, the little face off. It's a great setup for season 2. But that, surprise motherfucker moment when Dexter's looking for Deb and please don't be dead, Deb. He opens it up. He says, "Surprise, motherfucker!" And yeah, they just fight there because he's like, "What does the lab geek have with all this training and all this stuff?" And he takes an interest in him. And then season 2 gets even worse because before it's just like, okay, something might be up with this guy. And he calls him creep, he calls him psycho, all this stuff like this. But it's like, okay, after the finale, because there's multiple times where he's kind of connected or stuff's happening with the ice truck killer, and he doesn't say anything about it. So Dokes right away thinks there's massive red flags. And that's why the season ends with him. He's gonna tail Dexter wherever he goes. So we'll get that in season 2. But he's a great like character actor. He adds so much to the show. I think he shines even more in season 2, but he is something that even though season 3 and season 4 are great, the second he is, well, we'll talk about season 2, but he's not in the show, he is severely missed. And if there's characters coming back, which we'll talk about in predictions for like little ghost cameos, I really want Eric King in this show because him and Dexter, I'll say it for season 2, but the same way that Brian has this moment of facing off him as someone he is, equivalent to, they have that with Dokes, but it's also like, what if a normal person, a cop did find out? What are the ramifications of that? And, that's a tease for season 2. But in this season, he's great as a detective, great character. He's lots of great interaction with everybody, especially with Dexter. Tons of fun humor and whatnot. So Dokes is fantastic. Rita, the great Julie Benz. I really like her. She's very much like Deb. I think she has a bigger role than Deb in the sense that she plays this broken character, but it is to raise her stock going forward. Like it's lots of character development, but where Deb, it felt like, okay, we're specifically here to, she's gonna be like this, she's gonna go through the shit, and then she's gonna change next season. Rita's is a much more like natural growth, and we get from her being the very broken, and the way they dress her, makeup her, very, doesn't want to be touched, very scared, very like fragile. Oh, I can't remember what the word is that it's like if kids like they didn't want to make out in school or something, like they're very like nervous. There's a word for it, but either way, even in this season, she does progress because she like doesn't take shit from Paul, who's her ex-husband, who came from prison, went out everything. Then we'll get into him and Dexter, but she's a great character. She's a good foil for Dexter, and it is perfect because he has this girlfriend that has been through so much bad stuff that if they're, he says that about Deb, but it's almost like Rita is the perfect girlfriend as a cover, but he does start to. There's nothing's bad about Rita. That's the thing. When we get in other seasons, you can make cases for he might be with somebody that like you can't. This person is bad. This is someone that might even fit your code. Where Rita is the exact opposite. There's not a single reason why she would fit the code. She's this kind woman that got a raw deal, even through all this bad stuff. She's taking care of her kids. She's being the nicest person. And I think Julie Benz does a great job throughout the whole series, like evolving that character, but especially in season 1, because she has to play the kind of broken, very quiet, suburban housewife in a way, right? that role in the other person's hands could be boring, could be cheesy, could be cliche, but I think she comes off as genuine for everything she does. So Julie Benz is great. I think her and Michael C. Hall have like a good like a weird chemistry. Like it's weird to say Dexter does have chemistry, but it does have that. Rattle off a few others. Laguerta. I love Laguerta. She's very underrated. I love all the stuff she has with Deborah, just this hate for, and like I can't wait when we go like that relationship is grows so much. I love the kept from the books that she has this like, you know, schoolgirl crush on Dexter for some reason. We don't know. Like he's making no advances, but she just kind of like likes this geeky lab geek. They kind of dropped that in season 2. I wish they didn't. I think they did that because in the book she does die. Brian kills her, but I liked the idea of it, but they do kind of refer back to it a little bit here and there. But she's just this, strong ass, will take no shit from anybody, but also they talk about a lot of times she'll take no shit, but she's gonna do it in a sneaky way. She's not gonna do like dokes up in front. She's gonna remember if you said something bad and then embarrass you. Like Deb, there's multiple times where she'll embarrass in front of the captain or other people and stuff like that. She loves to make examples of people. She loves to be, if there's a power struggle, she wants to be up top. But then they give her moments of heart. There's that moment where Dexter, when he in I can't remember what episode, I think it's 4 or 5, when he's killing these people that are taking advantage of people trying to come to America. There's the kid, the little Cuban kid in the car. He sees Dexter, which is so great because they have this whole thing like he saved me, and they're doing like the sketch and everything like that. It's just Jesus, so Dexter doesn't have to worry about it. But she's thinking about adopting this kid. Like this kid has no parents, everything like that. I think they find like the kid's uncle or something like that. I can't remember. I should have wrote that down, but we see moments like that. We see moments with Dexter, with other characters. There's such a great thing because again, they could have just made her cliche, just the bitch boss the whole time. But she goes out there. She's very confident that because she loves the media to get the press. She's very confident that Tony Tucci is the guy, and multiple people say, "Hey, he's not the guy." That starts her downward trend. But then once he's not the guy, and she does fully realize that, and she feels so bad about the mother knowing this, and she has to tell her and everything like that. And the mom is just like so forgiving. It's just like, just get me to my son, save everything like that. There's a moment where she comes to like a support church meeting, and literally the mom's like, this is the woman who's going to save my son. And you can see the shame on LaGuerta. So that's a great thing. It wasn't like she just right off like, whatever, I was wrong. And it's great because right when you start to care for LaGuerta, that's when Captain Matthews is an asshole comes and says you're going to be replaced. So again, they do a good job of majority of these characters here are three-dimensional. Maybe other than Masuka, he's just a sex joke machine. But even when Angel gets stabbed, he has a little drama going on there. So all these people could have been, and that's the problem I think with later seasons. They introduce characters like that do just become cliche and they don't go much further. But in these seasons, they don't. Angel, much like it's a spoiler, but in season 2, Dexter says, if I could be anyone in the world, it would be you, Angel. And Angel goes, thanks. I don't know what that means, but thanks. I'll talk about that moment again in season 2. But Angel, everyone needs a friend like Angel. The actor David Zaz, I think is how you say his name. I think he's Maroni in Gotham or something like that too. I think that's who he plays. He's great. He reminds me, and not in the way of like the same quality, but Tom Hanks. People have always said, and I agree with the statement, one of the reasons why Tom Hanks is this great actor is because, well, you know what? I'm going to take our final ad break, and then I'm going to tell you the combination of Angel and Tom Hanks. I'll take my final ad break, last few notes, and then we'll rate the season. So I'll be right back after this ad break. So we're back. If you want the secret about Batista and Tom Hanks, I agree with the statement. One of the reasons why he became such a big actor and so good is he could play the everyday man very well. There's so many actors that cannot do that. They are larger than life. They're meant to be characters. They're meant to be superheroes, cowboys, criminals, all this sort of stuff. But to play just a guy is tougher than you think. And I think Angel, fuck, David playing Batista, he has that quality, and it's so well because I feel like we all know those people. Like Batista for me is like Taylor Field in real life, where it's just like this guy's just always positive, always happy, and you're just rooting for him. So it's so great because at one point Dexter's like, I don't know what I've done to make him think I'm his friend, but he's checking on Dexter, he's checking in with them, he's trying to be friendly. He's trying to extend an olive branch, and he does think they're better friends and everything like that. So it's kind of funny the like inner dialogue that Dexter says about him. There's a great moment where they go like clubbing and everything like that, and Dexter does not want to do this, but Angel's just like, "Oh, you and me, we're out tonight." And then Dexter takes him back to his home. Him and his wife are separated. I don't understand this. I know it's just like a little nitpick, but his wife is like, yeah, he can't sleep here. I understand they're separated, but she's like, clearly Batista is knockout drunk, and you're gonna leave this poor, Dexter just in colleague to like worry about him, but he does, and he brings him home. There's that great moment where Angel's hungover and he's trying to get some AC, and he puts his head right by the AC, and you can see the blood signs reflection. But he just does a good job of playing a guy who we all have that. I feel like someone trying to be friendly or is always the steady hand. It's like no matter what's going on, he's super positive. And we learn like he has alcohol problems or they're starting to form. He has his wife that's separating with him. He misses his daughter, all this sort of stuff. He's getting lonely. But when he's around people, he's positive and he's always trying to do what's best for them. And he does it every day guy role well. And I think that it sucks is again later seasons they find less for him to do. And I think I don't like some of the stories they give him, but he's always been one of my favorite characters. I think he definitely in the top 10 when I rank the characters. Yeah, he's just a joy to watch, and he does a really good job of portraying that role, which could be again boring that you wouldn't care about, but they do a good job. Masuka, he's just the joke machine here. He's a joke machine for most of us, and I think I like Masuka. I think he does a good job, the actor C.S. Lee, and it's warranted for him to eventually become a main cast member in the future. Yeah, he's anytime the show needs levity, he's there to give it and does a really good job. Trying to think of anything else. There's obviously like the Dexter Paul stuff, which is funny because I thought he was gonna kill him. They introduced Paul, he gets out of prison. I love the like, hi, like recovering alcoholic ex-convict, ex-husband, Paul, and he's like, Dexter, nothing clever to say. And right from the bat, it's like, fuck, you guys don't have a good setup. Like, you're not going to get along. And he just becomes a problem. He starts to try to assault Rita again because he wants more visitation rights. And then he tries to play it off that, she did just assault him. There was no attack. And then Dexter just gets mad at one point during a checkup because he's just like, I'm gonna, that skinny bitch won't take those kids away from me. I'll do whatever. Like he's just threatening Rita to Dexter while there's no what is it, the social workers around, and Dexter just takes his pant and whack knocks him out, and it's great because there's blood on the floor, and it's the first time in the show we've really seen him do something spontaneous, and it's very scary because he's a very, I think he even says like, I'm a very neat monster, and it's, I guess he says that in season 2, but it applies here. It's like every time it's like he stalks his prey. He has a plan. This literally hits him in the pan. There's people upstairs. What do? He puts him in the car. He ends up like shooting him up to get him like with a handgun. He gets some like major felony. So he has to go to prison for a very long time. So it's interesting because you start to see again that there is a personal side, because really if he didn't care that much about Rita and the kids and stuff, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't attack Paul for them, but he did do it. And that's where again it helps with the show as far as making him a monster that you could watch and not feel like, oh, I'm just watching a gross serial killer, which that's what American Psycho is, the sex scene, everything that, but that's just a 2-hour movie. That's why I think there's some rumor FX is doing like a TV show. I think I talked about this. I'm like, this doesn't make much sense, but good luck, FX. You got that. Let me see if there's any other storylines to shout out. Like I said, I liked all the Laguerta Tucci stuff. That's one of the first times too that Deb gets the upper hand because like she she feels like he's wrong. She has evidence, and Deb goes straight to the captain, and he's like, "You." Right when Deb thinks like she has an upper hand, it's like, why didn't you go to your reporting officer first? Like, why didn't you go to LaGuardia first? But then he brings LaGuardia as like, this better be the guy. So I liked all that stuff, all the dick measuring, everything like that. Let's see here. The road trip I loved as far as, there's some good humor there when he goes to check on the dad body and he's like, I need a minute, and he just really wants to get DNA. But there's one of my favorite scenes is what plays it? Slow Ride plays. And it's Dexter and Brian like packing the house up, but it's them like pulling out knives and they're getting rope and they're tightening things up and they're doing like all these things they do in serial killer stuff, and they're doing on the trip. I guess there's 2 things I should mention before I forget them. One of, if not maybe my favorite, like title sequences of all time. I never skip it. I love the song. I love it's so good. Again, talking about like the road trip episode where they're doing the killing stuff, all the like killing of the bug, like draining the oranges, all that sort of things they do that allude to the serial killers, like tying the shoes. Really smart, really well done, really well shot. And it's very clever, and they did a really good job, and it's iconic. And the score, I legitimately season 1, 2, 3, and 4. I bought them on Apple or iTunes back in the day. I absolutely love the score, not just because the show. I think Daniel Rich is his name, right? I think he did Wedding Crash. I think he did Great Gatsby, which I also really, really like those scores. He's a really underrated what the hell is the name? Why am I forgetting what they do? It's not a choreographer. What like a composer. Thank you, Travis. Bring my somewhere. He's really underrated, and throughout the show, whether it's Dexter's theme or all these other beats he gives, and I'll kind of give some examples later on, but like the Dexter theme, the Deb theme, the wedding, the ice truck killer, Trinity, all this sort of stuff. And just the show, like they hit these perfect notes. Again, later on down the line, I think they kind of lose that, but the Cuban music in there is really gay. It's just I loved getting those soundtracks. So big shout out to those. Just while I'm shouting out random stuff. Let's see here. And then I really like this line after that same road trip episode. You could see Born Free in that episode. Father Knows Best was my favorite. Is uh so they get to the house and Dexter's like really like emotionless and whatnot. And she's like, oh, yeah, this must be hard for you. You're so shut down. And it's so great because the show does this constantly on Dexter. They put stuff that's not on him, and it's just Rita seeing what she wants to see. He's not shut down at all. He's just being Dexter. He's thinking about other stuff. But because the dad, that's where she's like, oh, he's shut down now. So it must be because of dad. But it's really like, no, he's shut down all the time. So just fun little thing as far as characters constantly do that to him, as far as like, oh, whatever they think he should be feeling, that's what he's feeling. Same thing like with the blood when he collapses, he tries to write off. It's just like, oh, I got squeamish at ate breakfast, but that's good. Also, I didn't mention the donuts gimmick is good. Makes me want to eat donuts every time I watch the show. So it's tough. Let's see here. Think that's pretty much everything. Oh, there's another good thing too, where I think it's they are sending something. I think it's the keys to the hotel. I can't remember if it's the key. I should have wrote down the episode number, but either way, there's a moment where it's so great because it feels similar to the book of like Dokes really knowing who Dexter is, but someone goes like, "Why would the ice truck killer send this?" And it's all quiet, and Dexter's in his mind says, "To catch me," and it's quiet again, and Dokes is like, "What did you say?" And Dexter looks at him, and it's almost like he heard Dexter's inner monologue because there's no one else said anything else, and then they just move past it, like Dokes just misheard him or he was being intimidating. But it's great because it is almost like like he is like us the audience, he hears the other voice going on. So that was just a fun little thing. And then I talked about a little bit before, I did really like the kind of I think it's like a 3 episode through line of the Jeremy storyline, because we get touched upon that a little bit later, but again, it's one of Dexter's first times of trying to interact and really make a connection with someone, and it's all good all around as far as he's looking at this kid, he's gonna kill him, but then he finds that like that kid like he was sexually assaulted by this guy. So he's like, okay, it was kind of just. And they even do this thing where he has him pinned up against a wall, and it's Jeremy, and like a light goes over, and he sees like young Dexter. So he sees himself in him, and he gives him like a little bit like, don't do it again, don't steal my shit, and stuff like that. And it's so creepy and good. The shot, he runs down, like he walks down a hallway, Jeremy runs, he's like, is that it? And they have lighting, they have Michael C. Morgan. He turns around, he's like, you want more? And he's like, no. And he kind of gives him some advice, like, don't do it again, make sure they deserve it, stuff like that. And then we got brought back later because somebody gets killed in a similar fashion again as Jeremy, and he he goes again. Dokes almost catches him. He's gonna take out Jeremy or talk to him. He pretends to be like a guy looking for sex, and they go to arrest Jeremy, and like literally Dokes like runs past and hits Dexter. He looks at him, doesn't see his face because he has glasses, but he questions Jeremy, like, why did you kill? Like, I told you not to take an innocent life and everything. And then Jeremy breaks down, like, I just want to feel something, like I have no emotions, no nothing, but clearly when he kills something, he gives him a rush and everything. And then Dexter does this great thing where he's, taking the blood. He's trying to give him as much information of like, I live by a code. You gotta, I'm not, I'm a little like you and stuff like that. You got to kill the people that deserve it. And then another great scene is as far as like Dexter, kind of similar with Brian Lair, like protecting his own. Another cop gets in here. He's like, I got 5 minutes till his lawyer gets here, so I want some time. And Dexter leaves, and you just hear the cop like he's slamming. He's probably hidden Jeremy. And at this point, I think they're trying to make Jeremy being like underage and stuff like that. And Dexter goes right to his lawyer. He's like, "You're Jeremy's lawyer." He's like, "Yeah, you might want to get in there sooner better than later." And it's great to see him protect him. And then there's just this great moment as far as, okay, I struck killer is catch. And this is when he's starting to think that that is Sam Whitwer. So he's disappointed. He is going to go visit Jeremy in prison. He's like, this is my chance to connect with somebody, to give like, pardon some information on somebody, have someone recognize me, make a connection. And then when he gets there, the kid's killed himself. And he's like, yeah, I've given him information, but it was just like fortune cookie information because I told him just to kill who deserved it. And he did do that. He killed himself. So that was like a fun little like mini arc in the show. And there's a few other ones, but like that was the one that stood out. And yeah, I think that's everything I have to do with Dexter season one. I think, like I said, I talked about little stuff here and there. I like that they eventually were putting together that Brian wasn't. I didn't like Brian, how he attacked Batista in the middle of the parking lot. I thought, again, Brian attacking him there and going to attack Deborah was a little sporadic for what the character we had met, but it's fine. I got us to point A to point B, so everyone knew that Rudy was a killer, right? So I don't think I'm missing anything else. I love James Remar. Harry does, obviously, Harry becomes a bigger in the show later on, but he's great. Like, he was perfect casting for Harry. He does just feel so right in that role, and he does such a good job of carrying the character. Sometimes with, not the main cast and just small little scenes, he brings a lot of weight and like gravitas to Harry. So yeah, for a score for this, I think you probably know this by my talking, but this is a solid 10 out of 10. I love it. Like I said, it could be a perfect solo season if you wanted. Ends with Dexter. Again, you could end it right there of having this fantasy of the crowd of people in Miami knowing that he is the guy and he's killing all these bad people, and it's like people cheering and like, you really slice them up good, Dex. But again, the humor, I didn't write it all down, subjective, and plus watch the show. The humor is much better in context, but really well done. And yeah, I think everything's done great here. Character work, drama, writing, comedy, editing, pacing, the villain, the twists and turns, and the acting specifically for Michael C. Hall. It's just fantastic. So a 10 out of 10 for me. I love this season. I love every episode pretty much. Like I said, I don't think there's one I would take out. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about season 2. At some point I'll be recording that. And yeah, that's an interesting one. I think that's a bit more mixed because you got Lila Turney there, and you got some big developments happening. So let me know any thoughts you had, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Discord, on the comments. Let me know what you think about Dexter season 1. And yeah, I promise when you hear from me next, it'll not be boring. Bye-bye.